Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we're doing part 21, as I mentioned. So we haven't got any dinosaurs today. We've got a lot of really cool, like marine and flying animals, but we're going to be starting off with the flying animals today. So this is kind of the new species kind of revolution thing that's been happening recently. So we're going to go through some animals that we've already talked about before, but now they're new species in the game. So we've got 3 pterosaurs coming up by Leaf and Johnny V. We're going to be starting off with our first one, Rhamphorhynchus. So this wonderful guy here, Rhamphorhynchus. So Rhamphorhynchus in Greek means, in ancient Greek, means kind of beak snout. So, because as you can see, it's kind of got that little, almost like a beak look on its snout there. These guys are a genus of these long-tailed pterosaurs that came from the Jurassic period. If you guys have watched Walking with Dinosaurs or know a lot about these Solnhofen limestone, you know a lot about these guys, which are really, really cool. So these got a long tail. They're kind of stiffened with the ligaments, and they have like the soft tissue vein going on there, which is really cool. And another cool adaptation they have is they have lots of needle-shaped teeth around their head, which allows them to better catch fish and things like that, which their diet is just thought to be kind of more like fish and cephalopods, things like that. And they're actually believed to be as well in coprolites as well, as evidence of that, which is really cool. So the first named specimen of this guy came from Samuel Thomas von Sommersberg, which was from a collector, Greg Gaffs and Munster from 1825. So this is quite a really early discovery. And it was actually originally considered a species of Pterodactylus, which is another type of pterosaur from the same about time, but it has a short tail. But then they found more differences, and then it was described as its own species of Rhamphorhynchus, and it's gone through lots of name changes ever since. But the largest known specimen of Rhamphorhynchus is about 1.26 meters long, or about 4 foot 1. And they have a wingspan about 1.8 meters, or about 5'9". Though there have been larger ones that have been attributed to Rhamphorhynchus potentially, or maybe adjacent relatives, things like that. So they'd be quite large, with a large specimen being potentially up to like 3 meters long or so. In terms of life history, there's been lots of variation, and so we know a lot about their growth range. And it's believed to be that we have specimens that are flaplings, which is a really cute name for a baby, up to adults, which is also really interesting. And the juveniles have relatively short skulls and large eyes, and toothless beaks, and they're shorter in juveniles than adults. So it's believed that they could have a different ecology a little bit. So basically, the teeth would remain shorter and stockier as the animal grew, that accommodate to like eat a larger, more powerful prey, and which is really, really cool. And there's lots of estimates about their metabolism as well, having that determined that these guys fit into these years classes. So they've got different size and year classes, as we know, just because we have so many specimens. They were able to compare the growth rate between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old specimen. And the growth between the first year and second year was 130 to 173%, which is slightly faster than you find in alligators. So it's believed to be these guys would have likely slowed considerably, but they would take about 3 years or so to reach their adult size. And this actually shows to be much slower than like large pterodactyls like Pteranodon. So people think they either had determined growth or they were basically needed to be... There's also been an assumption that these guys would have needed to be warm-blooded to sustain their flight. But these guys could have had an endothermic metabolism, just slow growing. But we could have potentially had some sort of endothermy going on, which would be very, very interesting. And there is evidence that suggests that these guys may have been divers as well. A lot of people think of them as skim feeders, but there's really only a few animals that have those kind of adaptations. But these guys would have very likely kind of just dived in the water to grab prey. There's some evidence of sexual dimorphism as well. And there's also some evidence to suggest that because of the size of the caloric rings on Rhamphorhynchus, these guys could have been nocturnal, which is another very interesting. And eating all sorts of different fish and things like that. So really, really cool animal. Johnny V and Leaf did a wonderful job with this one, porting it to a new species. So let's them fly off, and then we'll have a look at the next one. So next we've got 2 Pandactylus, which is technically already in the game, but I'll get into that. So let's have a look at our 2 Pandactylus. So this is Tupandactylus, a really, really cool animal here. So Tupandactylus is a type of tapijarid pterodactylid pterosaur from Brazil. And there's a couple species known. Tapijara is kind of a different species as well. But the kind of two species known is kind of Tupandactylus imperator and navigans. So Tapijara is technically not a thing, though it is in the game, but it technically shouldn't be. But Imperator is actually known from a few nearly complete skulls, and the holotype was found in the Cancer Formation from the early Cretaceous, which is about 112 million years ago. And it had been described as a species of Tapijara, but it was initially then considered its own genus, since Tapijara is its own different thing. And there is a couple other species that we'll get into. There's like Navigans as well. And a very complete Navagan suggests that there may actually be some sexual dimorphism between the sexes, so some species differences might actually be sexual differences, which is very interesting. But yeah, these guys are very notable because of that large crest that they have. Really gives them an interesting look. And it potentially contains these two species. And they potentially would have used these large crests to either display for sexual or other types of signaling, which is really interesting. And because we know these guys so well, we can see the filaments kind of preserved in the crests and things like that. And there's also evidence of keratin around the beaks and things like that, and lots of keratin, especially between the crests there. So there wasn't like a hard bone. There'd basically just be two kind of bones going down here, and then this would be all fibrous like keratin, which is very cool. And it was described in 2006 as Tupandactylus, but before then it was known from Tapijara, and then they were kind of split into their own thing, though they are still closely related. In terms of paleobiology, these guys are estimated to be kind of like terrestrial foragers, and is actually, though they definitely are capable of flight, they would have spent a lot of their time on the ground, and since they have these long limbs and potentially quite good at walking, but they would pretty much only fly away to kind of get to new areas or escape from predators. So it wasn't actually adapted to the same type of lifestyle as starkids were, but potentially, which is quite cool. But yeah, really, really cool animal here. I do love Tupandactylus. And I really like the kind of little bit more beakish look here. It's very macaw-like. I think Johnny V did a really good job. I'm sorry I forgot to add all the different skins and things like that, but that's just the effort. And another thing as well, before I move on, they should all have picked the fibers and all that. They've just got the same kind of things wrong as most pterosaurs in Jurassic World. The membrane of the wing should connect up there to the legs, things like that, but it is what it is. Just kind of keep it consistent with the style. And last but certainly not least, in terms of our new pterosaurs, we've got another famous one. We've got Nyctosaurus. So Nyctosaurus, as you can see, quite a cool animal here. So Nyctosaurus is also named night lizard or bat lizard, which I think is very interesting. These guys are a type of pterosaur that come from the late Cretaceous around the Niobrara Formation. So this would have been around the Western Interior Seaway, which is very, very interesting. And was first described in 1876 by Othniel Charles Marsh, and the holotype was found in Kansas. But later they've been found more complete remains, so we have a pretty good image of what these animals look like. In terms of their size and weight, these guys were similar anatomy to Pteranodon, but they were much smaller. Adults would have had a wingspan about 2 meters, or about 6'6", and weighed about 2 kilograms or so, though there have been some estimates of up to like 2.9 meters, or about 9 feet, and about 4 meters in some dubious ones, but we really don't know too much about them. In terms of their skull and beak, they do have this large distinctive crest, as you can see here. That's at least 55 centimeters tall in older adults, and it's actually quite gigantic compared to the rest of the body. But we really don't know too much about how it looked. It's believed to be kind of potentially some soft tissue going around there, but not that likely, but still possible. But it's believed to be kind of just these two big spurs, big projections, you could say. And the jaws of these guys, as you can see, are quite long and pointed. And they were quite thin and needle sharp as well. And they're often broken in specimens, which is quite interesting. And they're also very similar to a lot of other seafaring pterosaurs, similar to like Pteranodon. They have high aspect ratio and low wing loadings, which means they were flying very similar to modern-day albatrosses. So they would have been riding wind currents and thermals and things like that. And you can see these forelimbs. one thing about Nyctosaurus is they kind of lost pretty much most of their fingers there, so they only really had a stub. So have giving them fingers is wrong. They would have lost most of their phalanges, which is very interesting. And they also have quite proportionally short hind limbs compared to their overall body, and actually have the shortest hind limbs out of any genera of pterosaur. And there's only about 16% the size of their wing, so they have very big wings but short legs. And in terms of their paleobiology, these guys, as little babies, they would, like other pterosaurs, they would have grown very rapidly after hatching, and they would have got into their adult size of about 2 meters in a year. So they would have gone from baby to adult, so quite fast growing. And some subadults have been preserved in near pristine condition, which lack any trace of a head crest, which suggests that these large crests may have actually developed after their first year of life. And then they would have developed these crests and maybe potentially live on to be like 5 or 10 years old before they die. And in terms of the crest function, we really don't know too much. Some think it could be like a head sail, similar to the tapijarids, like Tupandactylus. Could have been something almost like a giant antler. But we really don't know. We just kind of don't know that much about this display structure. But it's very interesting. And I mean, antler isn't not literally antlers, but it would have been like a socio-sexual display thing or some other type of display thing. And in terms of the paleoecology, as I mentioned, all known Nyctosaurus come from Kansas, as in the near Barrow Formation. And this would have been around when the Western Interior Seaway, around the late Cretaceous, about 88 to 80 million years ago, where basically the middle of North America was in the seaway. And there's lots of really cool animals found at this time that includes lots of mosasaurs, such as Tylosaurus and Clydastes, Elasmosaurus, Dolichorhynchops, lots of other cool fish like Cephactinus and Creolamna, I believe you say that, or Creolamna, so which is a type of shark. Very, very interesting group of animals. I remember reading a book on that. It was very, very interesting. Really, really cool animals, though. Johnny V's really done a wonderful job with making these, and thank Leaf for porting it as well. Really, really cool bunch of pterosaurs. So now we're going to move on to basically Leaf and Luca with their kind of fish revolution going on in Jurassic World. Same as Planet Zoo, it's just migrated. So we've got here the Mahi-Mahi, or the common dolphin fish, done by Leaf and Luca. Let's see if we can get one of you in the light and see you swimming around. There we are. So we can see here the dolphin fish. How wonderful these guys are. So the dolphin fish, or the Mahi-Mahi, these guys are a surface-dwelling ray-finned fish that are found in tropical, temperate, or subtropical waters pretty much across the world. They're also known as a dorado or a dolphin, as they also been known as dolphin fish. And they're most commonly found around the Indian Ocean, Costa Rica, Hawaii, and the Gulf of Mexico. So that's where they're most commonly seen. And the Mahi-Mahi kind of comes from the Hawaiian language. And in Maori, the sister language of kind of Hawaiian, Mahi-Mahi refers to a verb of doing it. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. Well, Mahi means work as well. So, in terms of description, these guys, as you can see, they've got quite a compressed body and quite a long body as well. And they've got this long dorsal fin going from head to tail. They've also got that rounded head and also like the concave anal fins, as you kind of see there. These guys are just built for speed, pretty much, and they're carnivorous, so they typically feed on flying fish, crabs, squid, mackerels, and other forage fish, and also zooplankton. So these guys can live up to about 5 years, but they really exceed 4. Females are typically smaller than males, though they typically get between 7 and 13 kilograms, or about 50 to 29 pounds, and about a meter in length, but they really exceed 15 kilograms, and exceptional Mahi-Mahi have been seen at pretty much like 18 kilograms. Though they are one of the most fastest growing fish as well, which is really interesting. They also, as a young, they kind of migrate through all sorts of weeds and things as well. Really, really cool. They reach sexual maturity about their first year of life, and then they will usually about the age of 4 to 5 months. And spawning occurs when they're about 20 centimeters long, and females may spawn 2 to 3 times a year and produce 80 to 1 million eggs per event. And in waters at about 28 degrees Celsius or 83 Fahrenheit, larvae can be found year-round, but they can be found mostly in greater numbers between spring and fall. And Mahi-Mahi fish are most typically found on ocean surface water, and they've got really nice flesh and a kind of nice color to them, and they're quite fast swimmers and can swim up to 50 knots, or about 92 kilometers or 57 miles per hour. It's pretty interesting. So these guys often, they're a very common fish species that have been fished a lot, especially around the areas where they're found in, both for recreation and for commercial fishing. Though there have been concerns because these guys kind of can accumulate like mercury because they're kind of mid-level to kind of higher-level predators. They will get poisonings from basically most of the food that they eat accumulates in their any toxins in the food they eat will accumulate in their flesh, so it can be toxic for humans to eat. But yeah, that's kind of just how it is with a lot of these things. But they are good food, very popular dish. But as long as they're prepared right and in the areas where there's not too much poisoning, they should be good for you. But yeah, really, really awesome. So we're going to be moving on from the Mahi-Mahi. The next one was done by Leif and Luca as well. We have got here Helicoprion. So we're going back in time to like the Permian and all that. So really, really awesome. Let's let these guys out. Let's let these guys swim off into the open water. Look at these beautiful guys here. Well, look at you. There you are. You're perfect. So, Helicoprion is not technically a shark. It's more closely related to chimeras. But these guys are a genodont fish. They're quite shark-like. And pretty much they're only known from their really interesting tooth wheels, which we'll get into. And fossils of these guys have been found between the early Permian and the middle Permian. And the closest living relatives of these guys are chimeras, so they're quite distant. And we'll talk about these guys soon. Basically, they were discovered first around like... but they're pretty much found all over the world, though. But the reason that they're not really well known in terms of their body is because their body is made of cartilage. As I mentioned, they're a cartilaginous fish, and it's very hard for cartilage to fertilize. So basically, the only things we get preserved of most sharks is their teeth, because it's got enamel on it. Though it makes it very difficult to kind of figure out what Helicoprion would look like. But based off most the kind of estimates and things, it's believed that they would have a really torpedo-like body and really interesting tooth wheels and kind of this really interesting looking face. This is kind of like slightly more outdated reconstruction of Helicoprion. If you look like the most recent versions of Helicoprion, looks a little bit different. But this is kind of like an older interpretation, so it's not quite accurate. But it looked a lot more like your modern chimeras. Very interesting. But they actually did get quite big as well. There's estimates ranging from about 5 to 8 meters for Helicoprion, so get as big pretty much as a basking shark. And the largest known whorls have been about like 56 centimeters in diameter and about 14 in crown height, which was an individual about 8 meters long, which is really, really interesting. And pretty much, as I mentioned, all we know from these guys are these really interesting tooth whorls. So we'll have a look in here. And they are quite rare, but preserving more than their teeth is actually quite rare. So we know kind of what their mouth looks like, but that's kind of about it. But in terms of their ecology, we really didn't know why they had this really interesting tooth whorl until recently. We learned that they've kind of got this kind of bite feeding thing going on. So basically what they'll do is have this whorl, they'll eat something and pretty much try and rip out something from hard shells. That includes like nautiloids or ammonites. So a half-shell cephalopod kind of gets bitten, and then they're able to rip the cephalopod out from their shell. So it's a very interesting adaptation. Kind of common comparisons in the modern day include like pygmy or dwarf sperm whales and even regular sperm whales. Has kind of been something that's been talked about, how this has actually been used to kind of eat those soft parts of these hard-shelled animals. And it seems they're able to use kind of pressure to basically rip them apart and then swallow the soft bits. And they do have quite a large bite force estimated, so it's potential they could be eating like bony fish and things like that. And that could only just be an aspect of their diet, but that's really, really cool. And yeah, they're basically a member of Eugenodontia, which was a group of kind of cartilaginous fish that lived from the Devonian into the Jurassic, but kind of went extinct around then. But yeah, really, really cool guys. There's all sorts of different species described, and many ways these reconstructions of these tooth whorls have kind of shown off. This is kind of a later one, kind of around like maybe mid 2000s or early 2010s, kind of things like that. But we have very different interpretations now, which is quite cool. And it suggests that the ecology is very similar to like sperm whales and pygmy sperm whales, dwarf sperm whales, and almost like curved beaked whales as well, they're kind of dentition. So it's kind of the latest that we know from what helicoprine would have been living like and eating like. So really, really cool that we get to learn so much just from the tooth whales and what we know about animals today. Really, really interesting to deep dive into these guys, no pun intended. But yeah. Next, second to last, next one was done by Leaf and Lucre as well. We've got a really cool animal here. We've got the green sea turtle. You've got here the green sea turtle. Let's see if we can get a good picture here. There's one swimming around. All pretty colours. There we are. So this is the green sea turtle, as you can see here. So really, really cool, charismatic animals. So this is very typical of a sea turtle. They've got quite a flattened body with these large paddle-like flippers going on here. And also there's quite a round face here. They typically grow as adults up to about 1.5 meters or about 5 foot long. Though the weight of an average individual can be between 68 and 190 kilograms, or 500 to 419 pounds, with a carapace length of about 78 to 112 centimeters, or 31 to 44 inches, with acceptable specimens getting up to like 350 kilograms and even bigger, and there's been some recorded about 395 kilograms and up to 1.5 meters in the carapace length. But we don't really know. Some things that distinguish green sea turtles from other sea turtles is that these guys don't really have really big beaks like hawksbills. These guys have very short and unhooked beaks, and the neck connection cannot be pulled into the shell as well, and they have the single claw on their flipper there, which is really interesting. And hawksbills have 2, these guys only have 1, which is very interesting. And they have various patterns on their carapace as well. They can have light or dark colors, and typically juveniles will turn dark to olive, and then the adults will be brown or even marbled, things like that. This is very, very interesting. In terms of their populations, though, they are quite widespread. They can extend through pretty much most of the tropical and subtropical waters worldwide. They're pretty much found in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, Pacific and Indian Oceans as well. Even though they've got slightly different DNA, they are quite wide-ranging species. And there's a couple of different populations of the Indo-Pacific population. And they come in different places and nest in certain places, including like parts of Australia, Central America, Florida, certain places around Africa, Madagascar, and even India, places like that. There's lots of beaches that they will nest on, specifically around the world. And they have kind of moved into 3 different habitats. So what will happen is that the mother will lay the eggs on the beaches, and mature turtles will kind of spend most of their time in shallow water with lush grass. And then adults will frequently come into these places and kind of eat these sea grass meadows, things like that, and do their thing. And they move across these habitats as well, and they typically stay near to like continental or coastlines, things like that, and they'll often inhabit coral reefs as well. And the coral reefs actually provide algae for these guys and help give them protection from predators as well, so then they do well there. So as I mentioned, kind of alluded to, their diet is for adults, they'll typically, juveniles are carnivores though, so juveniles will feed on like fish eggs, sea hair eggs, mollusks, jellyfish, worms, algae, crustaceans, things like that. But as they get older, they turn to eat more vegetation. So they'll feed on grasses and algae and things like that, seaweeds, as they get older, which is very, very interesting. In terms of life cycle, very similar to most other sea turtles. So what will happen, they'll migrate to these nesting sites. The females will come, dig a nest, lay their eggs, and then she will bugger off and do her own thing. Then a few months later, all these cute little baby turtles will hatch on their own. There's so many of them that they just, the predators on the beach, and hopefully some make it into the ocean. And then as they get eaten, basically only the ones that survive the best manage to make it into adulthood and breed again. So they've got very similar mating behavior to turtles as well. They will basically, females will practice polyandry, so that doesn't seem to benefit the hatchlings. They'll mate in the water and then come onto high tide, lay their eggs. These clutches can be quite huge. They range from 85 to 200. It depends on the age of the female, and the female lays them and goes away. And very similar to a lot of other species of reptiles, they have temperature sex determination. So basically the temperature of the nest generally throughout incubation will determine the sex of the babies. So some places, if it's higher, to be males, females, vice versa, things like that. Depends on the species. But they crawl out and then they get eaten by gulls and crabs as they hatch. And we actually don't know too much about newly hatched sea turtles and their ecology. But they will spend 3 to 5 years in the open ocean before they come back into the shallow waters and survive, things like that. And very interesting animals themselves. Very important to humans as well. Historically, they were kind of tanned to make handbags as well. And in Java and India, sea turtles are kind of eggs are kind of a delicacy, and their flesh is unclean considering. But there are lots of people will eat their eggs and things, and especially in places, a lot of places around the world, people eat them, which has been an issue for their conservation. Sadly, as I'll get into, big issues for their conservation includes basically hunting, poaching, and egg harvesting, along with strikes from boats. Pollution, habitat degradation, chemical pollution, which creates tumors, things like that. Really, really bad. Their foraging habits, destruction of kind of their uh, seabeds, things like that, especially for adults, is bad. They're also threatened by eating plastic. They're also threatened because become unbalanced in the future, which potentially also leads to extinction. But luckily, since it's such a charismatic animal, they are considered endangered, and there's lots of efforts to try and help populations, like helping babies get into the ocean a little easier in some places. Some populations I mentioned are currently endangered. There's many country-specific initiatives in places where they breed or turtle rescues, things like that. Like my local place, New Zealand, we have a turtle rescue that's not too far away from me, and basically we'll take in turtles that have gotten a little bit too far away from the tropics, take care of them, and then release them into the wild. But yeah, they're doing okay. There's still a lot of them, but as I mentioned, all these factors can contribute to the extinction. There's a lot of people that are quite worried they'll go extinct. But yeah, really, really awesome animals. How can you not love sea turtles? Just really, really beautiful little animals. Oh, not little, they're quite big, but yeah, how can you not love sea turtles? So let them swim off and do their thing. So last but not leaf, well, it is leaf. I just thought I'd have to make the pun. But we've got everyone's favorite big bad shark. We've got the great white shark, also known as the great pointer, the white shark, or simply just the great white. So let's release it. Let's wait for them to go off, swim, and do their thing. So let's. There we are. Here's one swimming off, doing its thing. So this is the great white shark. Everyone loves a great white shark. So great white shark, also known as white pointer shark, great white, things like that. There are the large species of mackerel shark, and they can be found in coastal waters and open waters of pretty much everywhere in the world, except like the most coldest areas. They're quite big as well. The largest individuals, which are females, they can grow up to about 6 meters long, or about 20 feet, and weigh between 1.9 and 2.2 tons, or about 4,200 to 5,000 pounds in maturity, which is very interesting. And you can see here they've also got a lot of this counter shading going on as well. And they're pretty much found all over the world. They can be found from the United States to South Africa to the Mediterranean and pretty much everywhere. And they're an epipelagic fish, and they feed on animals such as fur seals, sea lions, cetaceans, large bony fish, and other sharks. They're kind of a top predator in those oceans and the ocean ecosystems as well. And you can see they've got quite a large conical body and a torpedo-shaped body for swimming through the water much better with. And they also have this counter shading, so they kind of get the name the Great White, because they've got this white underbelly here and this dark top, which helps them to camouflage into the water, breaks their outline. They also, as I mentioned, they're quite large. Sexual dimorphism is present, so basically females are generally much larger than males. Male great whites generally get about 3.4 to 4 meters, or 11 to 13 feet, while females can be 4.6 to 4.9 feet, or 15 to 16 feet long. Though the biggest adults, as I mentioned, get up to like 6 meters and up to like 2.2 tons. And they're one of the largest living cartilaginous fish, so they get around really only things like whale sharks, basking sharks, and giant manta rays are bigger or heavier. But they are all generally quite docile and feed on plankton or zooplankton or smaller animals. So these guys are the largest macropredatory fish in the ocean at the moment. So that's very interesting. There's also, as I mentioned, kind of most things have got all sorts of different reports of sharks getting like big, 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 but most of them are not verified. They also have very interesting adaptations to help them kind of swim and survive in the ocean. They have the ampulle of Lorenzi, which allows them to kind of detect electromagnetic fields that are emitted by living animals, which is so cool. They can detect vibrations in animal muscles and things as well. It allows them to locate immobile animals as well by their heartbeat, and basically use that to basically find something that's injured. They think, oh, that's prey that's easy to find, and go kill it, which is really interesting. And they're very agile as well. They are one thing as well is that they are poikilotheromic, so they also a good example of technically gigantothermy. So they're able to warm up certain parts of their body much higher, a few degrees higher than the water they're in. So it allows them to live in cooler waters than a lot of other species could. And they're also considered endothermic or poikilotheromic because they can basically maintain their body temperature up about 14 degrees more than the surrounding water. So like the heart and gills can remain at sea temperature, but the rest of the body can kind of, in muscles as well. So it allows them to live in areas where there's more likely to be larger blubbery prey as well, which is very interesting. They also have quite strong bite forces. They have a bite force of up to about 3,000 kilograms, or about 18,000 newtons, which is huge. One thing about sharks as well, they have very complex behavior and quite complex as well. And their social structure, they have a dominance hierarchy based on size, sex, and squatters' rights. So females will dominate males, and larger sharks will dominate smaller sharks, and resident sharks will dominate the newcomers. So basically, that's how it works. So if you're a big female shark that's been there a long time, you're basically top dog. And if you're a little male shark that's new to the area, you're going to be bottom dog. So that's basically the best way to explain it. And they're also one of the few sharks that have been seen lifting their head out of the water and spy hopping. And this is believed because they potentially were looking for it's a fun behavior as well. But one thing is that they also could be observed in clans as well of about 6 individuals, things like that. It's really, really interesting. In terms of their diet, these guys are carnivorous, as I mentioned. They feed upon fish, so things like tunas, rays, other sharks, cetaceans, pinnipeds, so that's whales, dolphins, seals, fur seals, things like that. Sea otters and seabirds and sea turtles. So basically, they're on a seafood diet. If they seafood, they'll eat it. So really, really big animals. And typically, they'll have all sorts of different ways of killing them. But in terms of juveniles, they typically feed on fish, and then they transition to this diet of kind of more marine mammals as they get older, which is really cool. And so that's niche partitioning as they get older. So they have been known to immobilize animals such as fur seals, and eat elephant seals as well. And they actually also attack dolphins and porpoises, and they also can be avoided by detecting, typically from below or behind, to avoid being detected by their echolocation, which is really interesting. Also been known to eat lots of beaked whales and ocean sunfish as well. And whale carcasses is also quite a big part of their diet, so they've been observed scavenging on floating whales. In terms of their reproduction, great white sharks typically reach sexual maturity at about 15 or so years of age, though it's now believed to take far longer, with male great whites reaching sexual maturity about age 26 and females at 33, so quite a long life, quite a long time to get sexually mature. And the maximum lifespan was once believed to be about 30 years, but now it's believed to be 70 or even like potentially longer than that. Though there's not much known about their mating habits. There have been kind of some mating sharks observed, but we know they're ovoviviparous, which means that the eggs will develop and hatch in the uterus and come out and continue to develop until birth. They typically have a gestation period of about 12 or so months or 11 months. And they should powerful jaws will actually develop in their first month of life, with the unborn sharks practicing oophagy, which they will feed on the ova that's produced by the mother. And during this delivery is typically around the spring and summer, with the maximum number of pups recorded from a single mother is about 14 pups from a female that was about 15 feet long in Taiwan, which is really interesting. And being the top dog of the sea, they don't really have many threats, except for, obviously, human threats, as we'll get into, but they are preyed upon sometimes by orcas, which they often will turn them around and kind of suffocate them as well. So they'll turn them down in tonic immobility, which is something where they're basically turned on their side and they'll basically suffocate because they need to be constantly swimming to pump water through their gills, which is very interesting. And great white sharks, these guys are responsible for most shark attacks or shark bites, with about 272 documented unprovoked bite incidents from 2012. And Jaws definitely did not help. Let's kind of create this big thing about sharks, especially great whites, being big and scary and out to kill you, which is not really true. Most of bites are kind of mistaken identity or test bites, but they're just so big, the test bites can take your leg off, things like that. They don't really actively hunt humans, and they do not actually mistake often humans for seals, and which is really interesting. And there have been lots of things about shark culling or shark controls and tacking like that, which is obviously not good. But they are kind of so infamous because people do like seeing them and stuff like that. So there's benefits as people want to see them and people care about their conservation, but also people want to kill them because they're dangerous. But in terms of the conservation status, we really don't know. Because they're so long-lived and slow breeding, they are obviously at that risk of extinction, and especially because they feed on animals like whales and stuff, so declines in whales and populations of them would greatly affect these guys. But they are considered vulnerable. But due to them taking such a long time to breed and things like that, they could have issues recovering from declines and things like that. But there is lots of things that they face. Pollution's a big thing. Bycatch, as I mentioned, pollution. Obviously, shark culls are a big thing. Shark fin soup as well. Commercial fishing, though there's not really often kind of taking the great white shark. They don't really take many of them. But yeah, there is a lot of issues like that. People, as I mentioned, people culling them. But there are efforts to try and create ways that sharks and people can get on well, especially when they're using the beaches as well. So basically that helps with their conservation. But yeah, how can you not love great white sharks? And Leaf did a really great job bringing this into Planet Zoo. So yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.